Welcome back to JML Recording Studios, my beautiful audio engineering community. I'm Joshua Lutz, and this is all the gear I used in the Bruce Springsteen biopic, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Now that the movie's out, I can talk about the gear that you see in the film. I was audio tech specialist on this film, as I was Marty Supreme, and the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, which we were up for an Academy Award for, which was pretty awesome. Todd Maitland, the head of sound in the Bob Dylan film, was also head of sound in the Bruce Springsteen film, Deliver Me From Nowhere, and me and him just get along like peas and carrots. In fact, him and I have started a consulting company, which you will see launch this year, 2026. There was a lot of awesome gear on this movie, and I just want to jump right in. Months and months and months of research. The entire prop department did a huge amount of legwork to make sure that every piece of gear we used in that film was authentic, it was period correct, and it was used during the creation of the Nebraska album, which is the period that the whole film centers around. I'm not the biggest Bruce Springsteen fan in the world. I do happen to live in Jersey. I moved out of New York City after 25 years. This is home base for me. I'm 15 minutes outside of Manhattan, and it's where I keep most of the gear. So I'd love to start with some of the guitars in the film because they're pretty amazing. Where did we get the Esquire used in the film? I reached out to Dave Patillo, whose father procured the original Esquire that was sold to Bruce Springsteen. Dave Patillo's father procured it from some Tin Pan Alley studio in Manhattan, and it had multiple outputs because at the time they were scamming the record companies. When they were doing scoring, they would have multiple outs because every track you record, you got paid for. That guitar that Bruce Springsteen toured with for 30 plus years, that's now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, is not the guitar we used on set because it's far too weathered. In fact, the reason Springsteen stopped using it, as you probably know, is because it's just disintegrating. The guitar we used for the film, I got from Dave Patillo right here in New Jersey, and essentially I just called him up, told him who I was, and got him on board, and he gave us a guitar that he had handmade, which was great for me because I had been tasked to build the Hero guitar, and I was gonna start with this. This is not a Telecaster, and it's also not an Esquire. This is a hand-built DIY guitar that I made out of a swamp ash body and original Fender parts, and I was gonna knock it down and turn it into the Esquire for the film. Thank goodness I didn't have to. Dave Patillo agreed to let us rent his. Oh yeah! Eat your heart out, George Harrison. Kool-Aid Red Cherry ES335 with a Bigsby B3 and a Towner bar. How cool is that? You'll see this guitar getting some screen time leaning up against the wall when Jeremy is laying in his bed introspectively staring at the ceiling for inspiration. Nothing gives a songwriter inspiration like a popcorn ceiling, right? You'll just see it for a moment leaning up against that wall next to the D18. So it didn't get a ton of screen time, but it did get some. And I'll tell you, the 335 is probably one of my favorite guitars ever made. And what's cooler than a cherry white dot inlay with a Bigsby? Booyakasha! Get you some! Stevie Van Zandt was known to use a Strat tobacco burst at the time, and if you look close in the film, he had a black Telecaster top hat knob on the selector switch, the pickup selector, which I put on there for authenticity. This is actually a 50th anniversary because I didn't have 30 grand to buy the real deal, and it worked fantastically. It is a one-to-one copy of what Stevie Van Zandt would have used at the time. In the Colt's Neck bedroom scene, one of the favorite scenes in the film, you see two Martin guitars. You have a D18, serial number 289288. This is a early 70s D18. And can I just tell you something? Although the 1960s D18s are worth more, the 70s are where it's at. These 1970s D18s are the perfect blend of vintage tone, and they're not too beat up. Very few guitars pre-war are in good condition anymore. That's why they're so expensive. You can spend 40, 50, 60 grand on an old Martin pre-war, and they sound fantastic. I highly recommend, if you're in the tri-state area, going down to see Buzz at Lark Street Music right here in New Jersey. He's got a bunch of them there, super sweet guy. But they're just unobtainable because of the price. On the Bob Dylan film, Timothy Chalamet was told not to strum the old Gibson guitar, and he strummed it and wrecked it, and they had to write some crazy check to the owner, who I know. And it's a very funny story, but God bless Timothy Chalamet. He just goes all in. He doesn't know how else to do it. I'm a huge fan of that guy as an actor, as I am Jeremy Allen White. Jeremy Allen White didn't have as much time to prepare. You know, Timothy during COVID had 5 years to prepare for A Complete Unknown. Jeremy's just coming off of Shameless and Bear and all these amazing other TV shows and films. So he wasn't as versed as a guitarist, but he's a great singer. The other guitar you'll see in the Colts Neck room is the 12-string D18, serial 328787, so they're not that far off. This is the D18-12, also an incredible guitar. Let's do a little experiment. I haven't touched this D18 since the film wrapped, and let's just see how in tune it is. This is a sick guitar. Beautiful, beautiful guitar. I can't get enough of these Martin D18s. The D35s are too boomy. When I'm recording in the studio, I want a guitar that folds into the mix and I don't need to EQ it much. D18 is the way to go. The J200 that Bruce Springsteen played extensively during the Nebraska album, I had brought in a J200 that I bought and I distressed. It was a vintage reproduction, and David Goulet, the prop master, got Gibson to send us a few J200s, which are the ones that you see in the film. Another guitar that was not used on screen that I was tasked to fabricate by JD Sumo that we decided not to use is this really cool SG. We wanted a beat up guitar that Cats on a Smooth Surface, which is the band that used to open for the E Street Band at the Stone Pony in Jersey, would have played. So this is the guitar I came up with. This was a brand new cherry faded 2007. This film really brought me into distressing guitars. I learned a lot about using liquid nitrogen and heat guns and fire and all kinds of techniques to distress these guitars, and I had a blast doing it. Let me show you another one I distressed. So this is a vintage Tele copy that I distressed. I bought it brand new and I distressed it with my own techniques. You know, I take everything off of it and take it down to the last screw and distress it from scratch. Even the frets look like they've been played down at the cowboy chords and all that. JD Sumo asked for a black 70s Tele for Power Station, and I had it made and I brought it, but I don't think it's in the film. Another guitar you'll see at Power Station is this beautiful Gibson Black Beauty. It's funny, they hired some teenage kids that worked at Stone Pony and then some tech that tours with 311 to come in, and he told me, oh, that Gibson's a fake. I said, how do you know? He said, because the screws on the pickups are gold and the real ones are black. So I sent an intern to the local Dwayne Reed, which is like the CVS here in New York City, and she bought black nail polish and I painted it, only to find out that the originals had gold screws. So I kind of wrecked this nice Gibson guitar, and this is an original beautiful Gibson Black Beauty. So what happens when you listen to children. This is a centennial 100-year-old 1920s Gibson A2 that I restored from scratch. I sanded it down to the original bare wood and I restained it with a Stumac stain, nitro finish. I procured some old vintage 1920s Gibson A-series tuners and I redid the decal on the top, and you'll see this, I believe, laying on the bed in the Colts Neck scene as well. Some of the cool amps we used: 1962 6L6 Fender Bassman. The blonde Bassman has a special place in my heart because the Brits robbed Leo Fender's design and took the schematic and copied the topology one-to-one to come out with a little-known company you may have heard of called Marshall. They literally cloned this amp to put themselves on the map. So you have Park and Marshall that were cloning this amp, and it's widely considered one of the greatest Fenders ever made. If you're in the market, they're dirt cheap. You can get one for a couple grand. The 62, 63 AB is the one you want, and man, does it sound good. If you look, there's a scene where Bruce Springsteen and his girlfriend go on a date at a Texas State Fair, and you'll see this up on stage with the Texas State Fair band. At Power Station, you'll see a bunch of U87s and U67s. Some were provided by Power Station staff, and some I brought with me. The Yamaha CS80 I procured from a buddy of mine who had one. He rented it to me for about $1,500 a day. I gotta say, the CS80 is probably the coolest synth on the planet. They're worth about 90 grand now. At that Texas State Fair, you'll also see this beautiful old P-Bass. A lot of people don't know the precision bass is cool because of the history. Leo Fender came out with the precision bass because the jazz bass was meant to be played with your fingers, and the precision bass was the first bass guitar ever designed that was intended to be played with a pick. A lot of people don't know that. At Power Station, you'll see a lot of cool microphones and a lot of cool percussion and little things laying around. Big Man's maracas, the MXR Distortion Plus that Bruce was known to be using at the time, an old vintage tambourine, an old tuning fork, this pitch pipe. Oh, I have the coolest See if you can find this in the film. It is a Yamaha pitch pipe. It's like a little pocket watch. Oh look, Power Station Master List of Gear Rental. The Yamaha J100 and G100, the bane of my existence on that film. I bought it off a guy in Craigslist, and when we got there, he wanted $1,000 more than he told me over the phone. So from our research, we discovered that they were using almost exclusively old vintage Ace guitar straps. So I went and bought a whole ton of these straps. And if you look at the cover of Born to Run, used one of these old black leather straps with a skinny little button strap here. I believe they were Fender. In the end, we decided it was probably custom. Lots of guitar straps in that movie. Even the old saxophone stands. This is an old Hamilton stand from the 70s. So obviously when Bruce was recording the Nebraska demo, he didn't have a lot of good equipment. We had about a dozen of those crappy Tascam 4-tracks. And the thing about that 4-track, what a lot of people don't know is, it was crap then and it's crap now. That digital transport system was very finicky. It's almost impossible to find one working, and it's even harder to have one repaired. I hired Roger Deller at Electric Lady, a buddy of mine who's a tech over there, to go through a couple of them. And even when he was done, he said, these things are just trash. We needed one that had to come out of a brand new box that the scenic department fabricated and had made up. Even the styrofoam inserts were laser cut and custom made for us to make it look like Bruce was coming to the Colts Neck bedroom with a brand new 4-track to record the Nebraska demo. However, it proved almost impossible to find a clean one, so we went through about a dozen that we bought, and David Gulick and I stayed up late one night over at Steiner Studios in Brooklyn, piecemealing a bunch of them together to get one that lit up, the VUs moved, and it worked. Something I'm personally very proud of. Because I remember when I was gutting the two best ones we had, David looked at me and he's like, if this doesn't work, you're in big trouble. I think I probably would have been fired on the spot if I had destroyed the Hero Tascam 4-tracks. But fortunately, I piecemealed them all together, turned it on, and it worked like a charm. And that's the one you see in the film. There are some very cool microphones in this movie. The overheads that we used. Oh, I also have a pair of Shure. They were AKG C451Es, the original silver vintage pencil mics, which we used in some live scenes, but at Power Station, we used these gorgeous KM84s that I have that I used in the Bruce Springsteen film. KM84s are pretty good. A lot of guys like these on drum overheads. I gotta be honest, I don't. I know I'm alone in that statement. Give me a nice pair of ribbons all day, put a cloud lifter on them, that's my drum overhead sound. But I digress. For the recording studio scene at Power Station in Manhattan, I put these on the Leslie. These are Neumann 582s, the same 582s I used on the piano in the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. These are killer mics, by the way. Gefell makes a version of these that's pretty nice too. See if you can tell the difference between these two badges. One's original and one I fabricated myself. The most iconic mic from the film was, of course, the EV DS35. The DS35 looks exactly like an RE16. Oh, this is an RE16. See, I grabbed the wrong mic. Here we go. The DS35, the difference between the RE16 and the 35 is the proximity effect on the DS35 is a little bit better. It's made for just screaming into it, which is why Bruce loved it on stage and toured almost exclusively in the 1980s on an EV DS35. The mics that was a never endless hunt because we just needed a bajillion of them are these old Shure 57s and 58s. However, if you look at the lineage of the Shure company, you'll see that they were called Unidyne back in the day. The Unidyne 3, the P95. Long before the SM57 and 58 were out, you had all different kinds of model numbers. And the 545 SD with the on and off switch. And the old vintage logo SM58, which was a dual impedance 50 and 150 ohm SM58. Our director Scott liked the silver SM58 from the 70s, so I brought a few of those in. Scenic loved to have these little bags laying around. But the coolest mic in the whole film has got to be the prototype that I made for Big Man, Clarence Clemens, the saxophone player. In the reference photo, you'll see this is the original saxophone mic that somebody fabricated for him. It looks like they used old coat hangers and it was modified. The bottom was chopped off. There's an old radiator hose clamp on there and an old ratty mic cable. I got this reference photo from an auction that it recently sold at, and I had to make it look exactly the same. What sealed the deal for me as the audio tech specialist. When I was on the Bob Dylan movie, there was a reference photo of Dylan in the 1960s singing at CBS Studios, where he used this old salt shaker mic, which I had to fabricate as well. After they saw the Dylan mic, They gave me a shot, and here you go. The Clarence Clemens saxophone prototype microphone that I built from scratch. I cut off the bottom. I put a little rubber gasket in there. This silver ring that holds these coat hangers that I had is actually PVC that I spray painted with a hammer tone paint. I used a 2-part epoxy to put these old coat hangers inside of this suspension ring. And the coat hangers, I had to go to like 5 different dry cleaners to get the old vintage thick style coat hangers, because now all the cheap Chinese coat hangers are made of a very thin metal. This yellow rubber that's identical to the original prototype are old gas lines from an RC car that I found. And of course, this is a Unidyne 3, not an original Shure SM57. And it works. I put an old vintage 80s Switchcraft connector on it, soldered it up, and thing sounds fantastic. My Echoplex EP3 that I used in the film is at Grant Clater's studio at Kenseltown East, so it's unfortunately not here. Here's a photo of it. The Tascam that I had, I got rid of it. I sold it on eBay for 50 bucks. This old glockenspiel was in the film as well. You'll see this on the bed in Colt's Neck. We also needed some nondescript DI boxes, so I just spray painted them black. Here we have the exact 1975 Ludwig Maple Custom. These are the actual cymbals we used as well. And back there is the acrylite that we used in the film. These are also the MD421s we used on the toms at the Stone Pony. The Stone Pony provided a few, and I brought the others. This is one of the coolest things I procured for the movie. This is a Peterson strobe tuner, the model 400. What's cool about this particular one is I refurbished it myself from scratch. It wasn't working, and I got in there and got it to work. It comes with the original static microphone, and it works great. I put a new bulb in there and set it out at power station. This would have been probably what Springsteen would have used to tune his guitar at that time. I set it on top of the Fender Twin. Oh, and we had a couple Fender Twins in there. You know what other guitar amps we have that I really dug from power station? In addition to the Twins and the Bassman, is the Ampeg flip top, the B15, one of the greatest recording amps of all time. I remember when I worked at Electric Lady Studios, they only had one bass amp. They had like 50 guitar amps and one bass amp because that's all they needed, the B15 flip top, one of the greatest recording bass amps of all time. Of course, the Fender Champ. The movie would not be complete without a Fender Champ. Springsteen was known to use that at the time. Also, if you have a home studio and you need one guitar amp, unless you're doing like heavy metal, if you're doing rock and indie rock and blues and jazz, the Fender Champ, the 70s silver face Fender Champs are killer. You don't need a Variac to drive a Champ. You just turn it up and it breaks up beautifully. The Music Man HD 150 is another great tube amp that I decided to use. From reference photos, I used this at Power Station. And then of course the Yamaha J and G 100 series that you'll see Stevie Van Zandt using all over the place. One of the coolest pieces of gear we used on the film is during the Texas State Fair. There's a pedal steel player in the State Fair band, and I got this DeArmond 602 volume pedal. The cool thing about it is that it's the first guitar pedal ever made. So, pretty cool. Toledo, Ohio, United States. May 3rd, 1968. We get so used to seeing made in the United States on all this stuff, and America being the first. What's so cool about that is all these Americans that were inventing all this technology at that time were immigrants from all over the world, and that's what's important to remember. America is and always will be the melting pot. So that's not all the gear from the film, but that's some of my favorite gear that we used in Deliver Me From Nowhere, the Bruce Springsteen biopic. I'm Joshua Lutz, this is JML Recording. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, mash that subscribe button, that like button. Share this with your audio geek friends, and don't forget to watch the Bob Dylan biopic movie of all the gear we used in that film as well. I'm Joshua Lutz, this is JML Recording.